Hi, folks. It's Mark Murphy with TravelTube.com. I am back. I was taking a couple of weeks off. Everybody was busy, but boy, there was a lot of news, a ton of news that took place. And I'm going to cover a lot of it. Today, we are going to get into what took place with Venezuela from a travel standpoint and what you might want to think about going forward on your travel plans to the Caribbean, because there are still some hot spots and things could change pretty rapidly, as we saw. I'm going to get into the Hilton Hotel controversy. How about entitled passengers on airlines? Are you as sick of these people as I am? And what is it and why do so many governments, local, state, city governments, feel just this unbelievable urge to tax the crap out of tourists? I'm going to get into that and some more, including a take by a traveler to the United States who had some interesting things to say. And I'm going to run that video at the end. You're going to want to stick around for that. But in the meantime, as I always ask, please follow us on all the social media, under traveltube.com. Remember what it looks like. We got that logo over my shoulder if you're watching this on video or on Spotify or on the site. And also all the podcast apps, because you can get great information just while you're driving in your car, on a train, on a plane. Just download it and go. You don't have to come to the site because we have many ways to distribute this content. And we want you to be able to consume the content wherever you can, however you want to consume it. Now, let's get into Venezuela really quick. We're not going to get into, the logic behind or any of that stuff. But the result of the Venezuela action closed airspace for the Eastern Caribbean. And people on Saturday morning woke up expecting to fly out, and planes were grounded. They weren't going anywhere. And of course, typically I get called. And as usual, I tell people, well, if you had booked it with a travel pro, they'd be working on your behalf to get you back. Now, they can't do anything if airspace is closed unless they're going to tell you to swim or take a boat. You don't want to do that these days because, those drug running boats, I'm kidding. You're not going to get blown out of the water in a cabin cruiser. However, there's no meaningful way to get back from the Caribbean when you're there. Also, at the same time, it was only closed for about 24 hours, folks. So was it a big deal? Well, it kind of sucks. If you're in Puerto Rico, if you were in Aruba and you were scheduled to fly out, let's say Saturday, they opened space up Sunday, but they had a backlog. So maybe you didn't get out till Monday. You were lucky if you got out Sunday, but maybe you didn't get out till Monday. Maybe you got out Tuesday, whatever. By Tuesday, it had all cleared up. But at the same time, one of the things that people don't understand is even if you have travel insurance, it typically doesn't cover acts of war. So you want a policy that will cover you in the event of almost anything. So ask a travel pro about cancel for any reason type of insurance, and make sure it's as broad as possible, because we do live in uncertain times. And that's what I shared on, I think it was News Nation that I was on over the weekend. But again, like I always do, I always extol the virtues and the benefits of booking with a travel professional. Even though I've never been a travel agent, I've never been a travel supplier, I've only owned media companies. Anybody who's followed me knows that I have been doing interviews on national networks since 2009. And every year I do a lot of them. I used to do even more when I owned my company, but I still get called regularly as things, go awry, or as seasonal travel comes up, for whether it's President's Weekend, spring break, Christmas, Thanksgiving, you name it. But if there are disruptions, obviously I get called. If there's something bad that happens, I get called. And if I'm able to, I always mention travel professionals, not because I get paid anything, because I don't. I do this on my own dime, on my own time, and I leave myself open to go on any network that calls. So that's why I have Newsmax, Fox Business, News Nation, CNN, any of them call me, I'm available. And I like spreading the word, because I only talk about things, and anybody who knows me knows this. I am black and white. You don't find gray. That's why people either, when I talked about COVID, they were like, right on, dude, you get it. Yeah, because if you let 5,000 people march down the street in New York City, but at the same time, I can't, with no masks and no social distancing, but I can't go into a restaurant unless, I'm vaccinated, or that was, in 21. you got to go, huh? How does it make sense? And if you're going to allow these people to march in May and June of 2020, yet you're going to lock down everybody else, where's the logic in that? How do you square that? But of course, I had the a-holes who were like, "You're getting people killed. I'm not going to sell travel until this is over." Well, yeah, people are still getting COVID, clown. So yeah, or I get questions, what's your medical degree in? Oh, for the love of God. And what's ironic is some of these people are travel agents who basically I spent the last 34 years supporting as basically an employee in a media company that covered the industry, as well as somebody who decided after 9/11 to sell his house to fund a startup to give travel advisors and agents the support they needed in the marketplace. And then in 2009, I said, how can I support them more? Because the financial crisis, everything was going on. Said, get my ass on TV. And within 3 weeks, I was doing TV interviews in local markets. And then 2 months later, I was doing the Today Show. And guess what I was talking about? Freaking travel agents. So the ones who had you're getting people killed, you need to shut up. What's your medical degree in? You know what, folks? I wish I could cut you out of the benefits that I deliver. I really wish I could. I wish I could be like, except for those people. But again, you benefit even though you bitch. That's just how you are because you're just miserable and you got TDS and a lot worse. So anyway, you think Fauci's a god. And even to this day, I know people in my own family that are like that. So yeah, but I'm not helping them by going on TV to talk about travel. Anyway, with that said, I went off on a little bit of a tangent, but I find that really annoying. So I figured I'd share that because I'm a black and white guy and you can like it or you can hate it. And you know what? At the end of the day, I don't give a shit. Either way, I don't give a shit. Like it, don't like it. It is what it is. I'm pretty comfortable that I've been a huge asset for the travel agency distribution channel, not with just the products, but with the PR and being out there doing more interviews than every other person combined talking about travel agents. That's a fact. That's a fact. But go ahead. Yeah. I think some of you are still blocking me because you didn't like my stance on COVID when I said it should have been a 60-day news story. And I still believe that that's what it should have been. And it actually ran about 75 days because they stopped talking about the counts, case counts, and death counts as soon as the BLM crap started because of George Floyd. That all dropped from the airwaves. Don't believe it? Go look it up. Go look at newscasts from June 2020. You don't see all the crap that they were hitting the administration over the head with. It is what it is. All right, back to Venezuela. So with Venezuela, it taught you the importance of having somebody as an advocate. It taught you the importance of having travel insurance because if you have to pay for a couple extra nights coming out of your pocket, and as long as the airlines were waiving change fees and fare differences, you didn't have to worry about any of that. So it would have been a minor claim, but it still would have been a claim. Probably would have covered the cost of your insurance. And because Colombia has been mentioned as obviously a big drug producer that ships stuff to the US, and our president said something to the effect that their president needs to watch his rear end, then I would say at this point, I don't think anything's going to happen there because the difference between Maduro and what's going on with Colombia is there was an arrest warrant that was issued years ago for Maduro, and we had Democrats back in 2018, Chuck Schumer talking about why hasn't he done anything about Maduro? He's this, he's that. And then you fast forward to today, and it's like, why did he go into Venezuela? But the point with Colombia is there's no arrest warrant. So they can't do a police action, which is what they were doing with Venezuela backed up by the military. They can't do that in Colombia at this point, given the circumstances there. If I'm wrong on that assessment, let me know, but I don't think that's going to happen. However, other things do, and depending on where you're traveling in the world, you want to basically make sure you know how to protect yourself and get home should things go awry. And I've seen it all going back to the early 1990s. So whether it was 9/11, you name it, H1N1, There's a whole bunch of things that happen, COVID, financial crisis. Protect yourself. When you travel, have the proper insurance, and that's to get back and get reimbursed. But medically, you may have seen a story about a kid who had a head injury on vacation. I forget what island he was on. He was either in Mexico or I think he was in the Dominican Republic, and had a traumatic brain injury. And they raised money to get the kid out of there because like a life flight's 25 to 50 grand. He's being treated now, I believe, in Florida. So you don't need to raise money because you'll coordinate with the insurance company and they will make the jet available. They will handle everything. You won't be paying out of pocket. You won't be paying out of pocket at the hospital if they need surgery there on location, and on and on and on. But if not, it's going to be like, hey, that's going to be $5,000, fella. What credit card do you want to put it on? Because they will get paid up front. They're not going to send you a bill. They're going to get paid up front because they'll never get paid if they send you a bill when you fly out, unfortunately. All right, let's move on. Hilton Hotels. You saw the whole story about Hilton Hotels, hopefully recently. A Hilton Hotel, I believe, was a Hampton Inn. And people need to understand, if you look at the hotel industry, there are some big players out there that control virtually all the brands under 3 companies. So as you look at it, whether it's Intercontinental Hotels Group, whether you're looking at Hilton Hotels and all their brands, we look at the Marriott brands, et cetera, there is a ton of them. And they kind of all live under those 3 brands. What people don't understand on X when they're bitching about and tweeting to Hilton Hotels, oh, Hilton Hotels, your PR, blah, 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 you got to fix this and that. They don't own the property, folks. That property is a franchise. They're basically paying Hilton Hotels to put the Hampton Inn flag, if you would, up to get into the reservation system under the Hilton Hotels umbrella to access the frequent travelers that might use points, et cetera, under those brands. But the marketing reach of those brands is why they do that. They have to bring the property up to a certain level to meet the level that's demanded by whatever that particular brand promises that they have to abide by. And one of the things they have to abide by is they can't be discriminating against people staying in their hotel. Could you imagine if they said, oh, I'm sorry, are you Indian? I'm sorry, are you Asian? Are you Black? Are you this or that? You can't come. You can't stay at our hotel. We're not taking any Blacks or Asians. You would be up in arms. Everybody would be, especially people that are on the liberal side, up in arms. But you can say, we're not going to allow any DHS agents in, and they think that's okay. Well, guess what? It's not okay. And a lot of these properties are going to have a rude awakening if this continues, because the place in Minnesota, according to Hilton Hotels, is now out of their system. I did see Laura Ingraham like that night that they said we kicked them out of the system. I went on, I tried to book it. I could see it was available, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, it doesn't happen, Laura, as fast as you might like, but Hilton Hotels does not control what goes on at the front desk or the reservation in the property of a Hampton Inn. It's a outside investor who built that hotel from the ground up or had an existing hotel and reflagged it with the Hampton name, got in compliance, got approved, but they own and operate the hotel. Hilton is just a marketing arm, but Hilton has standards and they can kick you out. So if they inspect the property, which they do regularly, and the property is filthy, they will kick them out of the system and they won't allow it to be booked because it basically tarnishes the Hilton Hotel's name. But I think people and this is what's annoying right now in the space, whether it's from the right or the left, people are getting aggravated with, let's say, corporate Hilton, when corporate Hilton didn't do this. Corporate Hilton's taken DHS reservations, and they should be taking reservations from anybody who has the ability to pay and the ability to follow the rules while on property. That's how it works. So calm down. If you're on the right and you're like, Hilton Hotels, screw these guys, take a deep breath and shut up. You don't know what you're talking about. It's immigrant from the name who owns that hotel under an LLC, and they operate it. And they chose to bring that hateful choice. They decided we're not going to allow these people with the .govs if they're in anything related to Homeland Security or Customs and Border Patrol. They're not allowed to stay at their property. Well, they're getting the FAFO response. So look up that hotel and go look at their Google reviews. People are bombing them. And again, I'm not a fan of that, but you have to understand, if you discriminate against somebody, you are going to catch some flack. Hilton Hotels has now said they can no longer be a franchise. There's going to be a period of time to transition them out, but they will no longer be a franchise. And they'll have to find somebody else. So what'll be really interesting is, are they going to have to go completely independent and lose that marketing power, which will really kill them? Or is some other hotel chain going to be like, oh, yeah, we're okay with, your racist behavior, your discrimination, your this or that, right? Because it's just it's not racism, it's discrimination. But my analogy was, if you said no Asians could stay here, oh, I'm sorry, you booked this hotel? You're Asian, you can't stay here. I'm sorry, you booked this hotel? You're Mexican, you can't stay here. You'd be up in arms. But if you don't like this Trump presidency, you're okay with it. Let that sink in. Not all of you, but some of you are. All right. God, airlines. Has anybody had a really great airline experience lately where you're like, wow, that was fantastic, man. I want to just fly around the world. It can't get any better than this. Like, wow, in that little seat with my knees jammed into the passenger in front of me. Oh, it's fantastic. Fantastic. No, everybody freaking hates flying. I don't care who you are. If you're flying business class, you're probably flying long haul. Yeah, it's a lot better than flying in the back of the plane. Don't get me wrong. But if you're flying to Asia, the flight sucks. It sucks. I don't care if you're in business class. It still sucks because you'll fall asleep. If you leave at night, you'll fall asleep. You'll sleep 8 freaking hours. You will wake up. And then what? I got another 8 hours. Ah! Yeah, I've flown so much. I've flown millions of miles. Ugh, I do not miss getting on planes every week, folks. But you know who I'm sick of? And you'll see this a lot on social media. I'm sick of these entitled people that go on social media and they bitch. I was on with my family and I asked this lady, and sometimes they'll film the person, which is really effed up. I know it's legal, but, because you're quoting in a public space. But then again, the airline can say, you need to stop doing that. But they'll film and they'll do a TikTok. I can't believe I was with my family and I had my husband and my 2 kids. And we asked this person that was sitting in the window seat, would they mind moving? And the person's like, nah, I'm really comfortable here. I'm just going to stay. And then they go on a rant that somehow that person is just a jerk and how dare they, and yada, yada, yada. And I'm looking at them going, I'm sorry. When you booked your flight, did you not want to pay the extra money so you could all sit together? Because there are ways to do that. Or if you booked it late and there wasn't a lot of seats and you couldn't all sit together, did you decide that you were going to break it up? Why couldn't your husband have sat with one of your kids and you sat with another kid? You all have to sit. Most of the planes are like 2s and 3 rows. They're you're not all going to sit in the same freaking row unless you're on a super wide body. So what am I missing? Like, you're not entitled to it. So how about you step back and shut the hell up? I see these people on TikTok and I'm just like, oh God, just stop. And then there was one where somebody filmed a woman who was like in the middle of the plane and she stood up and she blocked the aisle because her daughter was all the way in the back of the plane. And she wasn't letting anybody from the rows behind her. And there's probably 30 rows, 20 rows, pick a number, 15 rows behind her, that the way it works is the rows closest to the front of the plane get off first, right? And then you step out and you walk off the plane. No. This lady somehow wanted to teleport her child up to where she was. Like, how is your kid? Like if you like you're on the plane, you're sitting in a seat, your daughter's in the back, and now all of a sudden you want to have everybody stop where they're at, and somehow what is she going to do? Like a rave crawl across the heads of these people? Like, what are you doing? That's another one I saw just today. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. These people are so effing ignorant. And all I can think about is like, lady, here's what you do. Step in, let everybody go past you. If for some reason, and by the way, there's flight attendants at the back of the plane, not just the front of the plane. So just FYI, in case anything's going on that she's worried about. You can wait till everybody walks past you and the aisle's clear, and then you can go back and retrieve your child. Or your child, if they're old enough, and if they're sitting alone, I'm assuming they're old enough, then they can make their way up the aisle. There's only one way off the plane. You're not going to lose them. They're not going to disappear. They're not going to get kidnapped by extraterrestrials. Not going to happen. So what are you doing? Sit the F down. Sit down and shut up, lady. But those are two things that I saw. And I was just like, oh my God. Could flying be any more miserable? Or the person that they're telling, you got to get off the plane. The police want to take you off the plane, but the person won't exit the plane. Then they got to get everybody to exit the plane. And now people that were scheduled for a connection in Atlanta, flying out of LaGuardia, connecting with Atlanta, going out, let's say, to the Caribbean, they can't make their connection because of some entitled jackass who caused a problem, who was told they have to leave the plane, refuses to. And what they don't understand is they're going to end up arrested. But these are the people we have to deal with when we travel. So travel has gone from being like great experience once you get there to, I hope I can make it through the flight so that I don't freaking lose my mind before I get on vacation. And then what a great way to cap coming back from a vacation if you got some clown like that. Yeah, it's a great way to, I'm going to decompress, go away, spend a week at a beautiful all-inclusive, whatever it is, go on a cruise. I get off, I go to the airport. I can't take it. That's what we're dealing with. But hopefully not everybody. All right. Since we're talking about airlines, how about airlines and journalism? I saw this headline and I was like, what? It says another airline files for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. All flights canceled. I'm like, things are good. Like, what? It was on thestreet.com. So I looked at it. I'm like, what? I didn't recognize any of the names. One of them is called Jet It Airlines. And they just filed Chapter 7 bankruptcy. Oh my God, not Jet It Airlines. What the hell are we going to do? Can we get Secretary Duffy on the phone to fix this problem? What? We're all going to be grounded. No one's going to get to their... Oh, yeah, Jet It Airlines hasn't flown since 2023. But today, it's a headline because they're filing bankruptcy to liquidate. But they haven't flown in almost 3 years. Help. And the article came out like a couple of days ago, but this is like breaking news from October. Some of it's from October. Did you know that Florida-based Verijet and Montana charter carrier Corporate Air, they both initiated bankruptcy proceedings at the same time in October? And as this was going on, if this wasn't bad enough, holy moly, November, Kenai Aviation in Alaska, they followed a few weeks later with a total shutdown of operations. Because, yeah, you really want to go to Alaska in November. It's a great time. I mean, I've been to Alaska in October, and it's not so great. Right. Okay. So what is that? What's the purpose of that article? Does anybody know? Like, why would thestreet.com give a crap about something called Verijet, a charter operator out of Montana called Corporate Air, something called Jet It that hasn't flown since 2023? And that's a January 2026 article. Okay. Well, since we're still on airlines, this is where I need Neil Cavuto, because Neil Cavuto, he only ever wanted to talk to me about airlines. It was always airlines, airlines, airlines. I was like, Neil, I ran a small business, media. There's more we can talk about. Just don't like it. No, he just loved talking about airlines. He absolutely hated the airlines. And many of us can relate. One of the things I hate about the airlines is their really crappy so-called loyalty programs. And let me give a little advice here. American Airlines just changed the reward policy. And the headline, again, the article talked about how millions will be affected by this policy change. The average person that flies for leisure might take 2 flights a year, not 2 round trips a year. So my advice to you is book the cheapest fare possible. Don't worry about points. The points are irrelevant, because if you're doing 2 trips a year, unless they're massive long haul trips, which for most people they're not, they're domestic, on average about 3 hours of flying time max, you might get 1,000 miles. How many miles does it take to cash in a ticket? The low end, probably 20,000. But there's always blackouts. They also have like the dynamic miles pricing, because they didn't have that before. It's like if it was available, you could book it. It was 20,000 miles. But they've changed things. But the point is, they only ever worked for frequent business travelers. They don't really work for the average person. You're better off if you sign up for like a Chase Sapphire card and earn points that way. So if you're buying things, if you're paying for things, put everything on your card, you will get more flights that way than you'll ever get with the airline programs. The airline programs, they're not worth it for 90% of the population. They're just not. And anybody can argue with me, but the math doesn't math, as we like to say. It just doesn't add up. So the fact that they're saying when you book the cheapest flight in economy on American, we're not going to give you points. Who cares? It's not going to affect millions of people. It's not going to affect business travelers. The front of the plane is where the airline wants to focus, and they're only going to reward at any decent level the people that book last minute and pay premiums. That's business travelers, because the leisure traveler knows where they're going 3-4 months out for the most part. So they're going to get the cheapest fare. And that's what I always tell people. Book the cheapest fare. Screw the miles. Not relevant. Forget loyalty. They're not loyal to you. Don't be loyal to them. Book the cheapest flight. Now, I just saw that a federal judge has allowed the Hawaiian state government to charge a tax on cruise passengers. But that's in addition to the tax that they've already had for the hotel and resort industry, that they added another 0.75 of a point to bring that to 11%. And now they're going to charge on the gross fare that you pay on a cruise. If it touches Hawaii, you're going to pay an additional 11% tax. Now, CLIA, the Cruise Lines International Association, has pushed back on this. Tourism for a state like Hawaii, impact on it is about $1 billion. They say they need it. I'm laughing because they say they need it for climate change. But what are they going to do? What are you guys going to do? You guys going to shut down the coal-fired plants that are being built one a week and launched one a week over in China? How about India? Yeah. You're not doing it for, quote, climate change. You're doing it because it's a money grab. And because if tourists come to a destination, and this goes on everywhere, folks, everywhere, it's called taxation without representation. If you're traveling within the United States and you go stay in a hotel, I guarantee when you look at that bill, 7 or 8 out of 10 times, there's going to be local taxes that are charged that you can't vote for or against. They're going to fund some fraud or other crap in that destination. And they always tell you like some reason why they're doing it, but the reality is it has nothing to do with climate change. Because if you go and stay at a hotel in Hawaii and they make a profit, they are paying taxes to the state of Hawaii, and it's a high tax state. And if Hawaii, that has an economic impact of $1 billion, at least from tourism, that impact creates tax revenues. Those tax revenues should be more than enough to make sure the beach isn't getting eroded away. That's a fact. So this is just another money grab where there's no accountability because you're taxing people that come into the state from out of the state. There's no representation there. They can hit you as hard as they want. And guess what? The average tax now for a tourist staying in a hotel in Hawaii is? It's about 19%, which is right up there with New York as one of the highest in the country. These people are idiots. These people really are idiots. If I'm going to tell you that it's going to cost an extra 20% for your trip, are you going to go to Hawaii and spend $1,000 a night at the Royal Hawaiian Hotel and then get whacked for another 20% on top? Or are you just going to go down to Mexico and stay at an all-inclusive, pay less, travel less, your airfare is cheaper, your cost to on the ground is cheaper, your food and beverages are all included. Good luck. Good luck, Hawaii. Good luck. Really dumb idea. And we know why you do it, because the freaking idiots that elect you can't do math. And nor can you. That's just a fact. Because it's just a money grab. And if you can't operate with $1 billion economic impact from travel and tourism, and you can't take care of your beaches and your infrastructure, and by the way, you mentioned the fire in Maui. Yeah, the fire. Was that climate change, folks? Wow. There's a lot of conspiracy theories out there with that, but let's just say you've never wasted an opportunity to stick it to people wherever you can if you're in government. And if anybody thinks it's okay to pay these taxes, you're a fool. And all you have to do is look at all of the fraud that's being uncovered in states that are very similar to Hawaii in terms of how they're governed. And then ask yourself, are you okay paying more in taxes when you go on vacation? Don't you pay enough? Remember, in 1913, 600 families were impacted by the income tax. Now you pay tax on your property if you own it. You pay tax every time you buy something. You pay tax every time you earn something. If you invest and sell that investment for a gain, you pay tax on that gain. You pay tax if you stay in a hotel. Now you're going to pay an 11% tax on your gross fare. Gross fare. If your cruise ship hits Hawaii. Pretty bad situation. But I got to tell you, there is no talking to some of these people. They literally they just don't care. And they see it under their nose and they just allow it to go on. Now, let's step away from the US for a minute. We're going to come back. But I think one of the biggest dangers to the global travel industry is how some countries are instituting censorship. So I mentioned the situation in the UK. The irony is I have people like on YouTube's going, that's a lie. I'm going, okay, well, here's the video of your police chief in London saying he's going to arrest foreigners and maybe even go to those countries and try to extradite them if they say mean things that are directed at the UK, individuals in the UK or policymakers or whatever. It's like, this is what I don't get. It's on video, people. It's there. And if you missed the 60-minute segment on Germany, and they, the Germans and the UK, a lot of Europeans call our leadership a dictator. Yet Germany is now treating insults as crimes. So if I say something, and I do this on a regular basis, that you find insulting, you listen to the podcast. Did I insult some of you today? Yeah, I fucking insulted some of you. Too bad. I don't give a shit. But here's the deal. If I insult somebody and I'm a German and they come to the police, they go, oh, he said this thing and I was so offended. They can arrest you for that. If you do it online, it's actually worse. The penalty could be worse. So if I say something to you, I might get a talking to and I might get a significant fine. We're not talking chump change. We're talking, could be over $1,000, could be even more. But if I put it in writing on the web, because now a lot of people can see the insult, now that's a much stiffer thing, and I could go to jail. So they're basically raiding homes, seizing phones, and prosecuting citizens for words. This is the European model today. And there's a thing called the Free Speech Index. It actually rewards censorship with a higher ranking on its index. I say, screw Germany. Let's cut right to North Korea. Pack your bags. I don't know if you saw the news, because North Korea just opened up a brand new beach resort area that is state of the art. It's pretty sweet. And I mean, if you're from North Korea, you can't go there, but they need the hard dollars coming in. So they built this stuff up. And I just saw this story about North Korea opening up a whole tourist area to attract primarily the Chinese tourists because they're aligned with China. Very interesting. And one of their first VIP guests was a gentleman from Russia who handles some of their foreign affairs. I forget his name off the top of my head, but he went there. So the Russians and the Chinese can go to North Korea, and because North Korea is a puppet of theirs, I don't think they have to worry about getting arrested or whatever. But watch what you say if you go to Germany, folks. The speech police are in Germany, but the folks in Germany will say that Donald Trump is a dictator, but they'll arrest their own citizens for speech. I wish I could say you can't make it up, but they make it up every day. The alternative for many Americans, though, you can go to Europe, you can go all over the place. And I spent the vast majority of my business life traveling to major cities and places around the country. So, yeah, I mean, I would go to places like Chicago for clients. I would go to LA. I would go to Seattle. I would come down to Miami, Fort Lauderdale area. Not so much in between, go to Washington, D.C. because there was a conference, go to Vegas because that was a big market, go to Hawaii to meet with clients, and so on and so forth, right? So I've seen a lot of the country, but there was a lot I didn't see because the other time I was overseas traveling in Ecuador or traveling in South Africa or Zimbabwe or the Middle East or Western or Eastern Europe. Just go on and doing it all the time. So I always find it interesting when you hear like the kind of the European slur. Oh, Americans, they just don't do it. They're not very well traveled, this and that. And I kind of laugh because they talk about how well traveled people in Europe are. And I look at a map of the United States and the diversity of the landscape. I mean, everything from world-class skiing and mountaineering to glaciers in Alaska to Hawaii to deserts, just like Florida, beautiful weather right now this time of year. We're going to have great weather till almost till the end of May. Then it's going to get hot. And we'll have to do the flip of what you guys are dealing with up in the Northeast right now with the cold weather. But there's so much to see and do. But here's what I find really interesting. They're like, oh, we're so well traveled in Europe. Well, good for you. But That's like saying, you know, visiting another country in Europe is like me driving from New York to New Jersey or New Jersey to Connecticut, which is a couple of hours, if that. And I've crossed 2 states, which in your case would be 2 countries, assuming I was driving. It's a small, small place. And your countries are like the size, in many cases, much smaller than our biggest states. Not even close. So here's my suggestion. In 2020, after selling my company and renovating my house, I got in an RV and I traveled all over the country. I started in Florida, went up through North Carolina, went out across the country, ended up crossing a bunch of states, got as far west as the Pacific Northwest and Washington State, and then came all the way back and came down through Utah and just Arizona, and then ended up coming through Texas, doing hill country, coming through all the way to the Panhandle and back. And I still didn't see so much of this country, even though I put on about, gosh, that year we probably put on 12 or 13,000 miles of all the driving and all the stuff we had to do. There were also fires that we had to deal with and rerouting and changing plans. But this country is absolutely amazing. And there are so many things that you can do and experience, and it's so varied. And the food is different in the South versus the North versus some of the ethnic communities, and on and on and on. It's like we truly have a melting pot here, but we have very distinct areas of the country. And for somebody who did travel it in an RV and spent 10 months traveling it, I barely skimmed the surface. So if what's going on in the world's got you down, I would tell you, if you want to fly, go to Google Flights, go to the Discover, I think it's called Discover on Google Flights, put in your origination city where you'd be flying out of, and expand the map and leave the destination open and put in some date ranges, and you will see price points for air travel. You can say, I want nonstop flights. I want to fly from Fort Lauderdale, for instance. And I can look out and go, as I look out across the country, holy cow, I can fly to Nashville for $39. I wonder what the hotels are going for. Oh, I can book a hotel for $149. That's a pretty good deal. Maybe I'll do 3 nights and go experience a city I never experienced. Great idea. Do that in Dallas. Do it with, fly out to Phoenix. Go check out Chicago. Like, there's so many places you can go, or go to a secondary market and stay like, Fort Lauderdale, fly up or drive up and do Tybee Island. Go to Savannah and then stay out in Tybee Island. It's 30 minutes outside of Savannah. You could do a city that's incredibly historic, right on the river, and then you go down to Tybee Island, which is 30 minutes away. Fantastic. Great experience. Or do Charleston. There's so many things you can do. And the best way to look at it is you want to do it when you get great value. Now, of course, I always tell you, use a travel professional, but also at the same time, if you're doing a couple of nights and you're just hopping in, hopping out, you can use a travel agent. If you're going to stay like at some 3-star kind of beachy type of place, you could probably do it yourself if you're confident enough, or if you know a little bit about the area. But if you're going to do something that's 4+ stars or more, and you're going to have multiple connections, absolutely use a travel pro. Absolutely. But again, I do both. I don't talk out both sides of my mouth. Like, yeah, I book some of the stuff myself because I'm pretty damn experienced. But at the same time, I've used travel agents to book other stuff because there was value added there that I couldn't get if I booked it myself. You should think of it the same way. But for all the folks that have TDS and all the haters, and we've seen a lot of you up in Canada and other places, and my wife's relatives in the UK, some of them, I don't know what happened to them. Maybe it was the vaccine, because they were pro-vaccine and thought I was like the Antichrist for saying the vaccine doesn't work, which it doesn't. It actually does more harm than good. But hey, who am I? I'm not a medical doctor. What do I know? It's called data. But with that said, these people have serious TDS. And I've had people tell me, I'm not coming to the United States until that guy's gone. I'm like, okay, so there's 330 million people here. So you're going to stay out of the country because of one guy. And what policy is it? Oh, are you afraid you're going to get deported? Yeah, some of you actually think that, which is, the word for that is retarded. And you can't say that now, which is one of the reasons I'm happy. Because, a word that was perfectly fine, that was the name of the association, that became a bad word. So we had to change the association a few years back. But you're retarded. And I'll say it again. Yes. And if you're offended, I don't care. Look, I just did a Biden. I don't care. I don't care if you're offended, because people like this kid, I think he's from Ireland, comes to the US and he's blown away. So I'm going to leave you with this clip. It's about a minute long, of this Irish kid talking about the US and how just unbelievably amazing the US is. So sit tight. Here he comes.
People saying Americans aren't well traveled. They can't point out Switzerland on a map. They don't know anything outside of the country. They don't. I wouldn't if I lived here, bro.
And
if I lived here, yeah.
So hang on a second, folks. Let's get him back to sound.
Any other country, I'm gonna keep it real. Every state, yeah, is like its own country.
Hold on a second. I'm going to start him over. He's yakking.
I hear a lot of people saying Americans aren't well traveled. They can't point out Switzerland on a map. They don't know anything outside of the country. Of course they don't. I wouldn't if I lived here, bro. If I lived here, yeah, I wouldn't give a fuck about any other country. I'm gonna keep it real. Every state, yeah, is like its own country. I don't think people realise how big this place is. This place is massive. Put into context, yeah. In Ireland, I can get a 45-minute flight, be in Amsterdam, be in England. Totally different countries, bro. Miami is about fucking 8 hours away from Orlando, bro. I thought it was around the corner. I didn't realise how big this kip was. Americans don't need to leave their country, bro. They can go on a vacation inside the country, bro. If I was from here, yeah, and I wanted to go on holidays, oh, Grant, going to fucking California, going to New York, not leaving the country. I don't give a rat's about anywhere else if I lived here, to be honest. I get it, why people say Americans aren't well travelled. Bro, they are well travelled. This place is huge. If I was American, I wouldn't give a fuck about any other country. So, if you are an American and you feel bad about it, bro, you're not missing out on anything. This place has everything and more. So, don't feel bad. But unfortunately, it's my last night here as well, which is so sad. Bro, I'm gonna miss this place. Look at this street, bro. This is American out here. I'm gonna miss Walmart, Target, and all. Ireland is shit, bro. I'm not looking forward to going back. Look, the fire hydrant is still there. Still holding the fortress down, bro. Strong. Sad, sad times.
That is an honest perspective of an Irish kid. He's from Ireland, comes to the United States. That's what he says. And I couldn't agree more. So again, you got a lot of choices with travel. Recommend use a travel professional. More complicated. Travel with a group of people, without a doubt. Simple point-to-point airline ticket in and out. You're probably okay. Going overseas, absolutely. Staying in a resort, absolutely. Booking a cruise, absolutely. That's where you want to take advantage of that expertise. Again, please follow us on all the social media apps, traveltube.com. Remember the logo, it's unique. And also follow us on your favorite podcast app. Till next time, thanks for joining me, and thanks for listening to my rants.